solving that problem. Think about the principal, for example. You go to the principal and say, well, Jerry's swearing at his homeroom teacher. What does the average principal say? So go fix Jerry. Huh? Go fix Jerry. So the principal has a motivation to do anything except say, go fix him. And you go to the parents and say, gee, this homeroom teacher is a disaster, and go fix them. So we're not in any place of energy. We're not in any place where people are becoming our partner. We're not doing any co-creation. Same old, same old. Whereas I say, look, it's between Jerry and the school, and you are resources in solving it. You are resources in solving it. Each of them come from their own side as resources in solving it. But the place where they're willing to become engaged is at the interface between the systems. The motivation for the principal, you go to the principal and say, I think you have a problem in your system, and the principal says, I think we need a new therapist, right? That doesn't sound right to me. Everybody else is fine. And then you go to the school, the family, and say, you got a problem here in the family, and the parents say, oh, the other kids are fine. And Jerry was fine until he had this teacher. So you've squandered the energy of changing. We should say,
all the other kids aren't fine.
In this, put it this way, naturally the other kids aren't fine. But the family is interested right now in blaming the school. In other words, when there's a problem at an interface between two systems, each system is not available to think about themselves. They're distracted. Some of you have had the experience in school where if you really have a lousy teacher, the family goes straight to hell. The family isn't able to think about themselves because they're being distracted by the teacher. If this teacher, it's impossible for them to look at themselves. By the way, I have to apologize. The air conditioner was supposed to be fixed 2 weeks ago, and last week seems not to be here yet. There's a part that is somewhere out in Yerushlayim and not landing. But by next week, it may be here. Otherwise, it's a problem interface between, Neve Yerushalayim and whoever is the support you're supposed to bring in. But go figure that one out. Did you see the difference? In other words, we want to engage people as solving a problem they can focus on. Yeah.
So when we're talking about co-creating with schools,
right.
We're saying that they both have a problem. Co-creation happen when really, let's say, it really is just the student's fault or just the school's fault, but the school joins to help the child solve the problem.
That's right. So,
meaning they don't have to own it could be it's really not their problem.
But nobody has to own anything. They need to be our partners in solving this problem.
But that's, okay, so co-creation doesn't just mean I'm coming with my heckle and my problem. It could just be joined together.
Right. You see, we're focusing on one particular place. This is a decision. It's a choice that the therapist makes, not because it's more correct or less correct. It's less correct, right? People who like to be smart look at this and say, this isn't very smart. Obviously, this problem is a differentiation in the family. Obviously, the problem is a differentiation in the school. Well, that's very smart, but it's useless, you see, because that way, what does the therapist do? The therapist becomes the Ibn Chacham, who knows what's the matter with everybody, but he's not, see, nobody's a resource point. They're all part of the problem, none of them are part of the solution. How does he engage them as part of the solution? This is the problem that we're going to solve, and I want you to help me to solve this problem. Now, this kind of narrowing of the focus is absolutely necessary for working in complicated systems. You can't spread yourself thin working in a complicated system. There's too many people here. If you want to do psychoanalysis for the guidance counselor, good luck. It's going to take a long time. So the way to focus is to define what is my role. You see where the I position is? Harry and Lynn are always redefining their role. They're saying my role is to help both of you to solve this problem. That's my role. Help me to solve this problem. Now, how do you help me to solve this problem? Turns out that you solve your own problems too, but no other way. That's how we work with strategic therapy. But the I position of I want to help, I need your help. Not I know better than you. You're down there and I'm up here. You're up here. I need your help to solve this problem. You're willing to help me. I need your help to solve this problem. You're willing to help me. See, you take an I position that's different. From that I position, you co-create with the other people who thought that they were under the magnifying glass is the problem, and suddenly they're the solution. And people are more able to engage at the beginning as part of the solution. At the beginning, yeah.
It was really nice to see this. Like, I terminated with 2 clients.
Yeah.
So we were reflecting on the process, and they said what was like the most helpful was that they felt like I want to know the answers and I'm the expert. And they said the fact that you always like helped us find solutions on our own, they said like that gave us the biggest confidence.
Okay.
And that was like such a clear.
So you see, there's a beautiful application of where, in any therapy, when Freud saw people lying on the couch, same hour, 6 days a week, what did he say to them? He said, "You're nuts, I'm going to solve you?" No. He said, "This is what I need to be able to help you. We need to engage in this together. I have a role, which is to listen. You have a role, which is try not to censor what you're thinking. Try to just let whatever your thoughts are, including your dreams, just allow yourself free expression. That's your role. My role is to try to listen to that and understand it in a different way. If we can do that, you can help me and I can help you." See, it's not so different from the beginning of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis got twisted at some point, in America mainly, into a power struggle, where the therapist knows everything and is going to be able to have X-ray vision and see it all. That was not how psychotherapy began. Psychotherapy began with Freud, and it began with a very modest position. And that allows clients to see themselves as co-creators in the therapy. They say, and so at some point when they're attacking you and saying you're no good and blah, 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 so what's your position? Stop that, that's not right. You say, this is something that's important for us to understand so we can get back to our roles, because I need your help to get back. When we do this, we don't really have my role. You were waiting to say something?
I just wanted to add to this. I think you said it, but I feel like as my role as a therapist, I want to take away from every problem the blaming part. Who is at fault here? It doesn't. There's never one person or one party at fault. Not the school, and not the. It's not the way of thinking. And the minute I change that there's no, I don't have to know who's to blame. There isn't anyone to blame, and nobody has to be to blame. Then it becomes a whole. Then we can do co-creation.
Okay. Right.
That's how I think about
Is there
it.
a place to make sense of things? I know that's like not.
You see, the therapist's role is in small, we're going to look at it here, in this big system, but it's true in the room with 2 people. We make small steps. We don't jump to conclusions. We make small
I
steps.
think as human beings, we have the tendency to think that we need to judge it, like, oh, someone's getting divorced, who was at fault? Like, who is at fault? Why does anyone have to be at fault?
Human beings have the unfortunate tendency to think they can understand more than they can understand. Right? So one of the things that they want to understand is how it happened. One of the things they want to know is what the future is. One of the things they want to know is causation. This chronology. Causation is a whole other story, which from the time of Socrates, people were saying, you don't see causation. You see one thing and then another thing. What's the issue of causation? That's a complicated question. So we always think, and it's not a bad thing to think, but then when we're working with somebody, we lower it down. You would say dumb it down? No. You focus it. You make a choice. You say, what are we working on? What's my role? Is my role to understand everything? No. Is my role to listen carefully and understand a little bit more? And then you see more than I see? Winnicott used to say, the great moment in therapy is when you're starting to have a thought about what you might want to say to the client, and the client says it before you do. Right? That's a great moment in therapy, right? Because that means that you're following. But it also means that the 2 of you are working together. I hope you had those moments every now and then. The first thing you need to do is go, and then it can happen. And then you say to yourself, well, early in training, you say to yourself, I'm going to run and tell my therapist because I'm a genius, I figured it out. But shortly thereafter, or when you come to your supervisor, the supervisor says, it's just that you're working well. It's something that's, another step, and that's where you need to be but lower it down, right? In other words, stay with that process. Don't go jump, God knows where, because that's happened. It means that who's letting you be a therapist? Who makes us a therapist? What was the last 2 lectures about? About the role that we're given as a therapist. We don't create that role. We're given it. We can offer it. We need to find out what the role needs to be. In this case, it's a particular role that they've chosen, but it won't work unless people give us that role. Yeah.
There's something that's really standing for me here. Number 2, look for a solution, because I feel that most of the semester that was not the focus. We're not looking for the solution. We're looking to explore more, and
Right.
this is the first time that I'm hearing we need to focus on the actual problem.
Right. Well, when we did strategic therapy, we talked about focusing on the problem. And we said that the symptom, right? The symptom was the problem. That the reason to use the symptom was because that's where the power is in those particular systems. And then the last 2 lectures we were saying there are families with a certain level of differentiation that give us that role. And so we would apply that, it's a good connection you're making, and say when you're dealing in the interface between 2 systems, you can assume that your role is going to be a problem solver. In other words, that they're not going to give you the role of let's imagine how this school came to be that way. Or because you say, well, let's imagine how the family became this way, and they say the family isn't that way, it's the school. So they're not giving you that role, right? So you say, well, let's, move things around. That's not your role. We just want this business of Jerry swearing at his homework teacher, we want that to be solved. So it's like a symptom, right? And so they're giving us the role, and we're assuming the role of focusing on the problem and enlisting people as our allies, as resources. And why are we doing it? Because that's what works in the interface between systems, right? Now, if you're dealing with a guidance counselor who says, this is not the first kid who's swearing at this teacher, and we think that we have a racial problem in the neighborhood, and we think that we ought to have a meeting of all the parents and all the teachers to talk about racial tensions in Philadelphia. Well, she's giving you a different role, right? So if she's giving you that role, so well, no, that's fine. You won't say, no, let's just stay with Jerry, right? But that's a different situation. And the same thing if the family says, look, he's swearing at this teacher, but his brothers are also doing this, and his grandfather did that. Never mind the school. Help us to understand the family. Go for it. They're giving you that role. But generally speaking, because when you're in an interface between 2 systems, the level of differentiation of both systems diminishes because they're each blaming the other one. And so you're likely to get the role of focusing on the problem, in other words, the symptom, because that's the role that they'll give you. Okay, so that was a good connection.
But in a family, let's say the family comes to you and their kid is wetting the bed, this thing we've discussed for so long,
Right.
then you don't necessarily work on the symptom or on the problem.
Well, you see, the family will say, look, the kid is wetting his bed. And you say, well, when did he start wetting his bed? And, we talked about it. He's always been wetting his bed. Likely it's not, we have a developmental problem, and the issue is to have him not suffer from it too much. But if he said, well, the last 2 years he started wetting his bed again, he's now 9, he started again at 7, he was dry from 3 till 7, and what happened when he was 7? Oh, nothing really, Grandpa died, but that was nothing. And then you say, well, Grandpa died, and what happened to Grandma, then what happened to Dad, when Grandma, and so forth. So you're thinking systemically, but the family says to you, we just want him to be dry. We just want him to be dry. So you do what we did. You see, you do a strategic therapy at the beginning, because that's the role they're giving you. Because you say, well, let's understand Grandpa. I said, let's understand the bed. So if you're going to have a power struggle with the family, look, I'm able to think about 3 generations of differentiation, and you want to dry a bed? What kind of a therapy is that? Or you can say, yes, first we're going to dry the bed, and then we're going to think about, in order to help me, see what this is, in order to help me, you're a resource, in order to help me to understand how to dry the bed, I just need to know a couple of things, right? For example, I need to know what happened to Grandma after Grandpa died, and how did that affect Dad, who now is busy with grandma all the time. Okay, so we're thinking systemically. Are we going to use it? Not yet, right? Are we going to use it? We're going to say, oh, well now, let's say that when he wets the bed, it'd be important for Dad to give him the pill. And so Dad has to negotiate with grandma that he needs to be at home at the time when the kid goes to the bed so he can take the pill. So are we dealing with a pill? No, we're dealing with a pill and with the father. So they would say, well, that's wonderful, and it works, right? Then you would say to yourself, what else? You see, the people who created that system never said what else. They said, oh, no symptom, family solved. We would say, no symptom, maybe the level of differentiation has risen, which means I can try to negotiate a different role for myself. And then I start to say to them, now that he's dry, we have an opportunity to think about the family. Would you like to do that for an hour and see what we get? And so you take a different role and see if they give it to you, right? Yeah.
So we're talking about these roles, how they give you roles. You basically mean like we're meeting the client where they're at?
What's that?
When you say like the client gives us the role,
Right.
it sounds like they're controlling like our position. But do you mean does it mean that like we're supposed to just meet them where they're at? Like where is like
Yeah,
meaning like
well, look, when you say meeting the family where they're at, that is usually misunderstood as meaning I'm Sigmund Freud and they tell me where they're at. Because they've given me the role, I say, well, where are you at? And they say, oh, we're going to open our hearts and tell you where we're at. But whether they're not opening their hearts, they're saying, what do you mean where we're at? The bed is wet, right? So that's the role they're giving you. See, we're not creating that role. If you look at the different roles, these aren't roles that we create and offer. These are roles we've learned from clients. These are roles that they've given us. That's what we're going to be applying here. That you see that in the interaction between two systems, they will give me the role of solving the problem. They won't give me another role. I'll go to the family, they'll say it's the school. I'll go to the school, they say it's the family. So what role are they giving me? The role of saying, you want this kid and this homeroom teacher to solve it. Let's work on that. Then you're my resources.
But so when we say to them, like when we challenge them, or they say, give me a solution, and we say to them, well, what do you think? So that's us taking our role and pushing it higher?
That could be a huge mistake. Right. In other words, when the family is giving us the role of dry the bed or stop the problem in school, and we say, well, let's just, think about it, then they say, well, that's not your role. We want you're an expert. You're going to dry the bed, right? So you say to yourself, it's not a big difference, but you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to dry the bed. The problem for you is to say that you really believe that, right? That, okay, I'm going to take the role of the expert. What do I need to be an expert? To be an expert, I need to know a couple of things, but now we've recreated our roles. You're my resource, and I'm looking to be an expert, but I need your help in being the expert. And what I need your help is not in what necessarily you feel about it, but let's just follow the symptom. Let's follow what happens after the symptom, not imagine what happened before the symptom. Not that it's not true, but let's follow what happened after the symptom.
So you're basically playing them?
What?
You're basically playing them like you're pretending to be the expert, but doing it delicately in a way that makes them feel like...
Okay, so here, Eunice is getting on to one of the great resistances to this role. All of us, Ibn Chachamim, believe in the truth. Truth is a very, significant matter. It's MS is a serious notion, right? It stands on two legs. All the letters stand on two legs. There's such a thing as truth. Now the question is, who knows the truth? That's another question, right? So there's a truth, and then there's us, and then there's this thing in between, right? So there are those of us, in other words, all of us at some point, who say, look, don't play around with this. I think your kid is wetting the bed because Dad is too involved with Grandma and the family's out of kilter, right? The truth. The family says, thank you very much. I think we'll go to somebody who can dry the bed. You go to the family and say, look, the truth is that I need to understand the truth. I need to understand the truth about this family. What's the truth about the family? Differentiation, blah, blah, blah. I need to understand the truth about the family. Say, thank you very much. There's this guy next door who's going to do CBT, and we'll try that first. So you say to yourself, wait a minute. where do I come off knowing the truth? Where do is my role to know the truth? Anyway, I don't know the truth. Nobody knows the truth. But if I'm given a role of trying to solve something, and that's a way of helping them to get to their truth, so then that's my role. Now, truth, the people who love the truth always say about this kind of, you've implied it, but you can make it a little stronger, you can say, that's just a low manipulation. That's a low manipulation. This family is all undifferentiated, and you're playing with them, drying the bed. This family has 3 generations of God knows what problems, and you're telling them that you're going to solve the problem with the kid in the school. That's just playing to the crowd. It's just manipulating them. It's not the truth, right? I hope that appeals to you, because that's everybody's feeling about it, right? This is not a popular way of thinking that I'm suggesting. It's very unpopular for that reason. We have to know the truth. If you say to yourself, it's a long way to the truth, right? In other words, that saying the truth has never been a particularly productive thing. In other words, you think you know the truth, and somebody else doesn't know the truth, and you say, well, if I tell him, then he'll know the truth? That's very weak. You see, that really, in a sense, I assume for myself a role which is great for me and miserable for everybody else, right? I become the one who knows the truth, and everybody else becomes these slobs who can't understand the truth. That's not so honest either, right? In some ways you could say that's a blind manipulation. I'm just manipulating for myself. I need to have this role. If you say to yourself, I don't need to have that role. I like it. I really like it. But I don't have to have it. And if I tell somebody the truth and it's useless for him, or it makes him further from the truth, then why would I do that? Why wouldn't I do something, whatever role he's giving me, that will help him to come closer to his truth? That's what therapists do, right? I do what he needs in order to move along towards the truth, not what I need in order to be the holder of the truth. Among the people who discovered that was this little ugly fat guy named Socrates in Athens, who never told anybody an answer. Never. He said, I have some questions. You figure it out. Let's talk about it. Let's continue. I don't hold the truth. Now, the reason he didn't hold the truth is because his theory was that human beings don't know the truth. Right? It's beyond us. And that's not far from our perception also. It's the truth, but we're often very far from it. So then you get this question of, there's these 2 people in the room, and there's the truth. There's me who has some theory that I might know more truth, and these people who are suffering. Okay, where does the priority go to? To their movement or to my truth? The priority always goes to the movement that's possible for the person who needs help. They will give us the role that they need in order to start to move, right? Now, is that a manipulation? It's a manipulation if I'm using it in order to show how smart I am. In other words, if I'm using it to get them to do something because I think I know the truth, then it's a manipulation. If it's accepting a role that belongs to what they need at this given moment, then I don't think it's a manipulation. I think it's closer to the truth. But when you start to do it, it often feels like a manipulation. And when you see the masters of it, like that story that we did with Milton Erickson and the bedwetting, nobody asked this question, but you should have. In every other class, so you guys are just polite. Every other class that I've taught for the last 30 years, people say, that's a manipulation. How does he know that? And the answer is, well, he was just awfully intuitive, but he didn't know it. He tried it. He thought that it suited the mother. He thought that it suited the kid. He gave it a try because he thought that would help them to move along. All of therapy is about moving along. It's not about getting to the final place. It's about moving along. Moving along are small steps. People don't jump. They take small steps, and then they're frightened, and they get used to it. And so if we want to move along, we say, let's see what wheels you have. Let's see how you move and what role you give me in moving along. That's the role I'm going to take, and no other role, because all the other roles come from me. And that isn't my role. My role isn't to be smart here. The role of the therapist is not to be smart. When I was in training, people were still very engaged in psychoanalysis, and everybody except me went into psychoanalysis. I went into family therapy, and every supervision, you just wanted your supervisor to say to you that that was brilliant. And every supervision, you either got brilliant or not brilliant. And then you went out and told your peers, he said I was brilliant. He said I wasn't brilliant, I'm going to be brilliant more. And the word brilliant was like the word, like that was Briata Olam. You had to be brilliant. And it occurred to me that if we took away that word, brilliant, we would be a lot better off, because that isn't the role of any human being with another human being. Our role is not to be brilliant, our role is to be precise. Precise means reading the other person. Precise means allowing for co-creation so that they can move along. How do they move along? When I move along. So that means, you see, when I say to myself, okay, let me adjust my role to the role that you need, that's a co-creation, right? That's when things work. That's when the movement goes ahead, because people are always too alone and don't find the person they need who can help them to move along. And we say to ourselves, we're going to try to adjust ourselves as precisely as we can to what you need now in order to move along. And that's what your clients were telling you. That's a very, yeah.
Is there ever a place to like explain to a client or a family if you feel a different role would be beneficial for them? And it's not that they're
If what?
If you feel a different role would be beneficial for them, is it always that they're not capable and they need this role, or maybe they don't? Is there a place to explain to them and offer them something different?
Right. Well, that's a big question, and that you will learn for yourself as a therapist. In other words, when you become a family therapist, you will say to yourselves, what roles fit me easier? What roles don't fit me at all? Right? And then you say to yourself, well, I would like to offer this family to think about multi-generations and talk about a narrative. And they say, you're fired because you want a dry bed. Right? And you say, I don't know how to do a dry bed. It doesn't suit me. It doesn't suit everybody. So find a colleague who it suits and trade cases, right? In other words, not everybody does all the roles, but it's important to see what role the family needs. Now, there are those people who say to themselves, a therapist is a therapist. I know what a therapist is. A therapist is connected to truth. It's connected to, and so that's the role that I take. And I know how to make everything that moves in the planet come into that role. I know how to do it, right? Good. If you know how to do it, if it works for you. It doesn't work for very, very many people because it scares the daylights out of a lot of people coming for therapy. But there are therapists who are intuitive and think they're doing the same thing with every client. And if you would take verbatim and follow what they're doing with each client, they're doing something different with every client. They just think they're doing the same thing, and they think it's the same role. If you would follow it, you would see that they're changing the role all the time with different clients. So sometimes what we think we're doing and what we're doing is a little different. But I don't have a problem with that. In other words, I don't have the truth either, right? In other words, I know how I work. I know how other people work. What you need to find out is how you work, right? So you may find that when you say to clients, let's make the bed dry, they say to you, where'd you get that crazy idea? We want to understand this. So it's all right. So, but if you say to them, well, let's try to understand more, and they say, we don't want to do that, and you work some magic. In other words, you're able to say to them, I'll tell you what, I don't know how to make the bed dry, but I sure know how to try to understand your suffering. And that speaks to them. As we say, hey, so stay with that, and maybe that will do it. You see, these models are models, right? And the core of all of the models, and that's what I'm trying to sort of stay here too, the core of all the models is the mutuality and the co-creation. That's the core of it, right? Now that can happen at any given moment. And we saw the paradoxical families where you say to them in Italian, don't change anything, it's too dangerous. But you've only done that after you've understood them very deeply, right? And then you say, why you think that's not the case? Well, the Italian people who were doing that had been pretty good at trying to do other roles, and it just didn't work. But if you find a way to co-create At any level of differentiation, when you find the moment of co-creation, it may change the level of differentiation. Right? In other words, when you find the moment of co-creation, it's possible that then you have a new role. Because that anyway is your role. You're just looking for the way to do it. So Tamima is asking an important question here, which is, do we have to follow the map? Why would you want to follow the map? I made it up. You know, even I don't follow the map. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of trying to understand some flexibility. But if you're the type, and there are people like that, who no matter who walks in the door, they feel so well understood that something's changed and that's your role, then that's good. But I wouldn't count on it. When you're in training in therapy, it's good to have some other options, because you might just be saying that to yourself and it may not suit them. So you want to have some other ways of thinking. But if it happens, it happens. Because the issue, the core of it, is that differentiation rises when a moment of co-creation is possible. That happens with God knows what clients. It happens with schizophrenic clients. There was Harry Stack Sullivan used to say, he would interview schizophrenic patients, and he would say, when they're in the room with me, nobody's schizophrenic. They're just human. He also had this statement that human beings are always more human than anything else. So,
what if they can't co-create?
Well,
what if they're giving you the role to...
So that's the question that you'll ask yourself. But you'll ask yourself locally, you say, am I co-creating with this person now? Well, not whether they can ever, because we don't know that, right? But is it working now? Are we moving along? Or do we need to do something else to move along? Those will be your questions. So, okay. We're sort of doing a summary of the course, which is just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a question I've actually been thinking about since like the last
I'm sorry, what?
This is a question I've actually been thinking about since the last 3 classes.
Oh, no. Okay. Prepare yourselves. This is going to be a big one.
Like something I started working more with domestic violence cases.
Talk a little slower. There's a lot of echo here.
I started working more with domestic violence cases. And when I'm in those situations, it's hard for me not to say, like, the man is bad. He's verbally abusive to his wife.
Right.
So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is the idea is it seems like the truth is perhaps this person should leave this person. So, but is that a concrete truth or a truth, or is that my truth? Like, I guess what I'm trying to put all that together.
Right. Well, this one is a good one for the next 2 years. But let's put it this way. You're in a room. You're a woman. You're in a room with a woman and a man who's putting her down. He's calling her names. He's being verbally abusive. And you say to yourself, I have to stop this. All right. But how are you going to stop it? Would you stop it by saying, look, Charlie, this doesn't cut ice. You got to stop this, or I can't help you. The room has to change. That's a possibility. Lots of people do that. Would it stop if you say to him, now, if we step out of the Haredi system for a minute and go to Virginia Satir, who would change her seat, sit next to him, take his hand gently, and say, the noise makes it hard to hear your pain. And I think to hear your pain. And I think you may be hiding your pain from your wife, so she'll just think that you're a bad guy and not somebody who's so in need that she can't help. Right? Now, that's a different move, right? That's Virginia Satir. It takes a little while to learn that, and you have to learn as Haredim how to touch his hand without touching his hand. Say it. But you see the difference?
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking more working with the woman, and I can recognize that, obviously he had his own things and his pain, and that's why he's lashing out, but I guess for her...
Right, so as you're saying that to him, you turn to her and say, he's really done a good job. You haven't been able to look at his pain for years from all this noise, right? So then she's understanding that, and so forth. Now, would that be a transformative moment? It depends. If you're Virginia Satir, it is, especially if the camera's on. But there are some families who will say, both of them will say, that's the craziest thing we've ever heard. And we're going to go to one of these 12-step programs that gets him to stop with anger management, because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. What do you mean he's not violent? He is violent. Okay, so then you have to say, so, what, you know, have I been trying to do this because I like doing that, or because that helps them? That'll be one of the...
It's not invalidating to her.
What?
It's not invalidating, like, I feel like you can only say that after like a year of therapy.
Right, you can do it after 1 minute of therapy, and then you have a very firm co-creation, but you have to believe in yourself. In other words, the person who says that, if you say you have to, after 1 year of therapy, no, after 10 years of your therapy. In other words,
No, but I'm saying, like, you're basically making people in their pain. Like, you've been abused, and he's also been abused, and look at his pain. Like, why
Right.
don't you be ready to look at his pain?
so then you say, well, my role is to know the truth. And the truth is that this is bad and this is good, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, my role is to find where is the Archimedes point of change. What could the experience be in the room if, after all, she married him, right? If I said to, if I created a different moment between them, where pain was the issue and not the violence, and that the violence was a way of masking the pain, which it almost always is, right? So the content isn't so complicated. The question is, when you're going to go create, who are you? If you're doing it because I told you to do it, not going to work.
And this particular person was in couples therapy with her husband and then dropped out, and now he's seeing someone and she's seeing me.
Right. Right.
So.
Right, so we've been working on that here in the clinic. It's one of the interesting clinical questions, which is, if the problem for the two people is between the two people, is it good to talk with each of them separately? Is that a good way to do therapy? Or should we insist, but then learn ourselves what to do with the two of them together? And when they stop making each other suffer so much and stop distracting each other so much, then there's also room for individual therapy. Each of them can figure out how they got to be who, whatever. That's an open question. There's a sort of what are called decision trees in clinical thinking and systems, and there aren't any. We're trying to create some for ourselves so we make fewer mistakes in doing those sorts of things. It's an open question that we're working on. Erasing.
So, Virginia Satir, it's beautiful. I hope to be able to do that soon, one day. I just, practically, definitely there was co-creation and maybe an opening, but maybe tomorrow he's going to do it again and again and again and again until it's going to take a long time, and maybe he won't change, even with her.
Well, you see, we just talked about one moment. If you have a moment, then you need to anchor the moment. That's a whole separate set. I'll just talk about it a little bit. But, you know, I wasn't going to do this, but Neve pulled my Esther Abital. So
That's the interesting part.
the same thing. But
Because I'm dealing with it, I'm stuck.
then you say to him, now look at her face, and can she bear your pain? Look at her face. Here you've exposed your pain. You're not yelling at her this moment. You think you should start yelling at her again, right now, so that she doesn't have to look at your pain. And then you say to her, is this pain that you can tolerate? Maybe it's not. Maybe it surprised you. Maybe it's easier just to see the anger. How should we make this? And let's say that the two of them say, no, we're sick of the violence. You know, if we could get to the pain, we can. It's better for. It's very painful, but it's better than the violence. Then you say to them, well, the violence will, you know, sort of natural. It'll slip in, right? So when it starts to slip, what's your way of making it stop slipping? Like, what can you do? What can you do so it stops slipping? And you practice it in the room. You say, well, now start to yell at her. And then I'm taking my hand away. Would you want to take his hand? Right? And so as he starts to say, you stupid moron, you take his hand and say, and look at his face and say, there's pain behind it. Is that good for you? Does that work for you? Does that work for you? Is that, see, so, you don't just say, oh, a moment of co-creation has happened, the rest will take care of itself. That's not therapy, that's Walt Disney. There are movies like that. Actually, not anymore, because nobody believes those movies. So, but you say to yourself, how could this moment of co-creation recreate itself? How can I get myself out of it? Because, one of the technical problems is that happened with 3 of us in the room. When they go home, there's only 2. So how am I going to solve this technical problem of what happens 24/7 until the next session when I'm not in the room?
It also depends on the differentiation level of them, because if he has a very low differentiation, he's not going to accept it and say, talking about his pain.
So, right. And then you may say, oh,
I mean,
yeah. In other words, I've tried to do something. I tried to be Virginia. There are no family therapists in the planet who have seen a film of Virginia Satir and a film of Minutia, let's say Virginia, who don't try to be Virginia. That's what those films do, which is a little confusing because Virginia, she believes it from the inside. But let's say you say to yourself, I think the violence still has a place. It's not all about, it has a place. I don't yet understand it. You see how we're working to the lower differentiation and talking about no change? And so I think you probably need about 15 minutes of it daily. The best way to do it would be that you yell at her back, turn your back to him, because anyway you're not listening to him. And let's see how long. And then, 8 o'clock at night, is that a good time for it? No, 9:15 to say that. And this is necessary. And if the violence still happens when, even when you do it for 15 minutes, so then we'll have to increase it to 30 minutes until we have, something that you do in this way that pulls together what's necessary because we don't yet understand why it's necessary. See, so you switched. You said, well, this is lower differentiation. I haven't created magic. I tried. I didn't succeed in doing it because of me, because of them. That's not the issue. The issue is what can move now. You see what I mean? Am I confusing you or is this pulling it together?
Pulling it together.
Well, if it's pulling it together, then we're in good shape.
I'm just wondering, like a moment, like you presented.
Why are all the questions on the left side of the room? The men apparently all know this stuff. Yeah.
A moment like you presented with the husband, is that something that comes to a therapist when you're trying to spend practice, or is that something that you learn as a shita, like from a book or from a supervisor?
How do you become a therapist? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. In other words, when you have, you see, you just walked into it. So when you have completed reading the reader, and when you have completed listening to these lectures another 3 times, and when you've tried to, fall on your face and talk to your supervisor and figured out what you were trying to do and what you weren't seeing in the room and what was that, it takes 10,000 hours. Everything takes 10,000 hours. You know that book? It's a book, yeah? You know the book? Good, okay. It's a great, the Beatles became the Beatles in 10,000 hours. It's a great book, right? And Bill Gates became Bill Gates in 10,000 hours. What it doesn't say in the book is that in 10,000 hours he learned how to steal from other people. But anyway, 10,000 hours. And it takes a lot of time because in co-creation, you need to be you. And that takes time to work on. That takes a lot of experience. It needs a lot of tearful supervisory hours when you go out saying that wasn't brilliant and it wasn't even close, and then you continue to work on it. Your issue, and that's the issue of my role in what we're doing here, is what makes it move along. Right? It isn't a done deal. It's not like tomorrow it's all done. All psychotherapy literature suggests that clients do better with beginners.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Clients do better with beginners. Why do clients do better with beginners? Yehudas gave us the answer before, right? That since you had no idea what you were doing, you tried to just figure it out a little bit at a time, and the client said, well, that's what I needed. right? Because, in the middle, they become an Iber Chacham, and that's when we become dangerous to human beings. And then it sort of lowers down, and you say, okay, Virginia, there's no camera, it's just these two people that are suffering. I just want to move a little bit, have the trenches and raise a little bit. But it takes time. It takes time. So you have time. The Family Therapy Association thinks it takes 750 hours. It probably takes double that, but you can become, put it this way, a fellow traveler on the way, and you're always learning. If you walk out of a therapy session saying, I knew what I was doing, you're sunk. Time to retire. If you walk out of a therapy session saying, wow, I learned something that I didn't know before, think of all the variables, right? Not just with a family, just with one person. But all of it, if you're not learning,